We're glad to be joined today by author Aaron Fischman, who wrote a great book recently. It's titled A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. And this is a story about former major league pitcher and a pitcher who pitched in the Japanese leagues, Tony Barnette. And we are glad again to be joined by the author, Aaron Fischman, and Stan Markotich is my co-host today. He's joining the program as well. So good morning or good afternoon, gentlemen, wherever you are living in and wherever the listeners are tuning in from.
Thanks, KP. I'm excited to be here with both of you. Should be a good
Thank you,
time.
KP. Oh, sorry, Aaron. Thanks, KP.
Oh, no.
All right, so we're gonna just jump right ahead into this one now. Aaron, I've looked at your bio. It seems like you are mainly a basketball guy. You are the host of the podcast on the NBA Beat, and also you've done some work with covering basketball. So a bit of a transition, if you will, getting into writing about baseball, but I'm sure that you have been like a baseball, basketball fan throughout your whole life. So why don't we get to know you a little bit, Aaron?
Yeah, you're right. So it wasn't really that much of a transition because I like to tell stories and research and interview people and really tell human stories that are beyond the box score because I think that's one of the values of sports. I mean, I love the nerdy box score stats and X's and O's and all that stuff as much as the next sports fan, but I really like those deeper, broader, human, relatable stories that non-sports fans also can relate to, universal themes and things of that nature. But you're right that in recent years, more of my public-facing stuff has been on the NBA and basketball. But yeah, I've always loved baseball, and I've written about a number of other sports as well. But this project, even though it's just coming out, it came out a month ago, a little over a month ago. It's been in the works for a long time. So in my head and in my life, it doesn't really feel like a new thing. It's been a long journey, a joyful grind, as I like to say. So many ups and downs and challenges, but it's so rewarding that the book can now be in people like you, in the hands of people like you who get to see what I slaved over for so long and me get to see it resonate with people. It's just such a joy.
Yeah, congratulations, Aaron, if I could just jump in, KP, on the book. I finished reading it
Thank
about a
you.
week ago, and I thought it was sensational.
That's
Uh,
really nice. Thank you.
yeah, no, there's something that you did that I've sort of been racking my brain over and not coming up with a good answer. There have been a lot of books, publications, articles, and stories about um, North American players playing in international leagues. Gaijin, I think, means foreigner. So this is Tony Barnette's story of his life in Japan. And the thing that I found really exceptional was the fact that you really humanized the character. And one thing that or the person rather, and one thing that I think is missing almost entirely in the rest of the literature is that human element. Sure, you get a lot of books, articles that publish the stats that tell you about who went to play in what on what team, in what league, in what country. But nothing in terms of that actual background, the day-to-day grind, the living, the circumstances of life in this new environment and adapting to it. So I thought that was particularly, I mean, I thought that was exceptional. How did you get the idea? You just said a few minutes, a few seconds ago that you like to tell the human story. And was it just that natural instinct that you had, or did you sit down and say, well, let me sort of think about coming up with a book in a completely new way?
I really appreciate that, by the way. That's really nice to hear that was your takeaway. Before I answer that, do you mean how did I have the idea to humanize him and to write it in this way, or how did I get the idea for the book just in the first place?
I
Or
think
I
both.
can answer both,
Both,
but
yes, both.
okay, I could go on for a while with both. I'll try to give you the shorter version for how the story came about. So I was an undergrad at UC Davis, and there was no journalism major, but I was a political science and communication major. But on the side, I was doing sports radio, but also writing for a small independent sports website called Davis Sports Deli. There wasn't even a deli, delicatessen. It was just, that was just the name of it. And we were doing different ideas for interview series. So for instance, we did a bowl season series where I was blindly reaching out to kind of like cold calls, college football players who were games and teams represented as possible. But then after we did that in the spring, I reached out to more than a handful, maybe 5 or 6 AA pitchers, and I knew nothing about any of their bios. All I knew was that they logged a lot of innings and had some good K to walk ratios, basically. So it just ended up happening that Tony Barnette was the only person to respond and to agree to be interviewed. So that was the open for how I got in touch with him. That was over 15 years ago, believe it or not. That was in early 2008. So I've been following him in real time, and I've been grateful enough to get unencumbered access to him and his inner circle. And so I think that was one thing that allowed me to humanize him so much and so deeply, because I was not only hearing from him, I was hearing from his wife, his friends, his parents, his interpreter, teammates, coaches, writers who covered him, etc. So I was hitting it from all different angles, but he was so available and accessible and transparent, as was his wife. And but to go back to how the story came to fruition, to try to make a long story a little bit less long, there were different stages of it. So first he was writing, was doing interviews with us that were transcript interviews. So I sent him typed stuff on Facebook in a message, and he would type the responses back, and then I would post that, edit it lightly, and post the interview. We did a few of those. Then we graduated to him writing blog entries for that website that I referenced before. Then I graduated from Davis and went to graduate school at USC for my master's in journalism. And for 2 or 3 classes, I did different versions of the story, where then I started interviewing people other than him. So it wasn't just a very narrow focus where it was just his quotes and his thoughts and research, but also incorporating other people who are close with him, but not that many people. And I did, I think, a 1,500 word story and a 3,000 word magazine story. And maybe there was an audio element. I can't remember. I don't think so, but it's possible. And then that was in 2013. And then in 2016, just ahead of his rookie season with the Rangers, that's when I approached him with the idea to turn it into the book, and I was relieved for him to enthusiastically agree to do it. But as fascinating as I thought his story was up until that point, I just didn't think that I would be able to get a book deal in North America, just because I just didn't think that publishers would determine that it was newsworthy enough, just the aspect of his story that he survived and thrived in Japanese baseball. And I thought it needed that element that he finally achieved his lifelong dream of playing in the major leagues once he got that contract with the Texas Rangers. So he agreed to that. And then that was still over 8 years ago, which is crazy to think. So it's been a really long journey, and I'm grateful to still be close with him, and have his buy-in, and have him also excited and happy about the product, and doing interviews in media as well. So it's a really cool thing. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, you actually, sorry if I can just jump in with one follow-up. You anticipated the question, and that was what was Tony Barnette's reaction to the book, and I was thinking that he would be ecstatic. I think it is a very unique biography, and you also do something again, in addition, you create a community out of these foreigners in Japan. As you said, it's not only Tony's story; it's the story of other foreigners and the experiences that they have. And I guess was that a function of just being able to interview the other people at length?
Yeah, so again, these things that you're saying, it's really cool to hear because when I do interviews, people notice different things, and they highlight different things that are meaningful to them. And the two things that you've highlighted are really meaningful to me. So, first of all, honestly, it didn't really start as a Tony Barnette biography, if that makes sense. Or, I mean, it was always going to be centered around him, but because he was the driving force and it just made sense. Um, and I had the closest access to him and everyone around him. And I think his story is just so inspiring that it had to be the driving force. But I was maybe a little bit too ambitious at first, where I wanted it to be a biography of Tony Barnette and the foreigners around him, not just the players, but the English language fan site of the team, the people who started that blog and followed the team religiously for all those years. Um, the Canadian reporter who lives in Japan, who became friendly with Tony and other American players and other foreign players in Japan, um, and just also opponents and teammates who are fellow foreigners. So anyway, I think it was too ambitious at first, and that's evidenced in part by how long the book was on pace to be at first. I don't think it ended up being that long. I know I'm biased, but I think things like the bibliography and index make it seem like it's longer than it really is. I felt like it's not so long, but it was on pace to be ridiculously long, way longer than it ended up being. And there were things that were so fascinating to me that I had to be honest and take a step back and say, is that really serving the story the best way possible, or is it more of an ego thing that I did that research, I did that reporting, it's interesting to me, but is it really serving the narrative well? And would the narrative be stronger if it was a little bit tighter and more focused? So, for instance, his teammate Yuhei Takai, who I've compared to Rick Ankiel a little bit in the career trajectory, where he was a left-handed pitcher with a lot of promise and then got a case of the yips and couldn't regain his control and ended up being converted into a power hitting outfielder. And I really dug deeply into his backstory and that transition, which I thought is so interesting, but it was too long. That's an example of something that I just had to cut. Um, and he's also not a foreign player, so I'm a little bit getting sidetracked. It's a little bit of a tangent, but it reminds me of just how much I was able to learn over these years in talking with and researching a lot of these foreigners. And um that makes me feel so good that you got that you felt that it was a community of foreigners and gaijin that I was able to paint a picture about their various backstories. And that's one thing in stories that I've read. One of them is Astro Ball by Ben Reiter about the Houston Astros. And a number of really good sports biographies that I've read have been able to do this really successfully. And I hope I was able to as well, where it's not a tangent, it's important to the story, but they'll have these asides where they introduce the characters. So before you know where the character exactly fits in with the main character, or Tony Barnette in this case, you'll learn more about their background. And in this case, for instance, how and why they came to Japan. So it's not just like you're just throwing them into the fire and you expect the reader to know them right away. You're kind of setting the stage with that important context. So that was one thing I thought would really add to the quality of the storytelling. And from a personal standpoint, something that I really took pleasure from doing the reporting and research.
Yeah. No, as I said, that was fantastic. In terms of creating that community, the closest that I came up, now that you mentioned the other book, The Astros, was 1940, the Lou Gehrig story. And that wasn't about foreigners, but that was a great film that created that sense of community. So that was something that I had to think that hard to come up with that title when
Oh, that's
reading
really
the book.
nice.
Yeah, and I thought fantastic. That was just fantastic. So I will be recommending the book. I just thought it was great.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Stan.
Aaron. Thank you. KP, back to you.
Yeah, so thanks for all that. Now, Aaron, you touched on something a little bit earlier about how, of course, you reached out to all these AA pitchers, and only Tony Barnette was the one who responded back. So during that process, because again, you were doing you were still in school at the time, and you were trying to
Yeah.
write regularly. Did that kind of give you any kind of discouragement along the way? Because, hey, I sent out a bunch of requests, but only one person bothered to respond. Like, did that kind of like hamper your I guess your attitude, or did it change you in any way?
No, that's a good question. So in that particular case, it didn't. I didn't feel discouraged because I was busy. I don't think I was a double major yet, but I was still I was focused on my classes. I was a freshman at UC Davis, and while the classes weren't necessarily difficult for me at that point, still it was just a lot going on socially, just wanting to do well in school, being in a new city, where I was from Southern California, in a suburban part of Los Angeles, and moved to Northern California near Sacramento for college. So that there was an adjustment there, and I was just doing the sports writing and interviews on the side. So one, it wasn't a career at that point, but also I was just younger. I was less jaded. Um, I don't know. Just when you're different at that stage in life. I was like 19 years old. And I had I just I couldn't be discouraged by just some non-responses, and also the stakes weren't that high really, or they didn't feel high for me at that moment. I didn't really care that much if these double A pitchers responded or not. I thought it would be cool if they did, but it wasn't earth-shattering or anything even close when they didn't. Now, to be completely honest with you, with regard to the promo for the book or former classmates and stuff. I mean, I don't want to get too negative, but it's easy when you have a project that you pour your heart and soul into, and also with social media, and you're seeing all these amazing things that other people are doing, and superficially the level of acclaim that they get and stuff. When you have a classmate you felt like you were close with, or someone you thought you were friends with, who just doesn't really stops responding to your updates about what you're doing or something like that, that can be hurtful. So it's more of like the personal things where you know the person. And I just feel like, when not to be too negative or bitter, because there's so many people who have been so helpful and supportive throughout the project, and I really do feel the love. But when in those rare instances when that does happen, I just don't understand it, because the person that I am, and I'm sure both of you are like this, is when someone reaches out to me about something that they're passionate about, um, first of all, I want to know if there's any way that I can help. But even if there isn't, I want to say, great job. It sounds like that was a long process for you. Good job. You put in the work, you took that risk, and good on you for doing that. And so when it's crickets back, that can be really hurtful. But with regard to this particular thing, it wasn't really that big of a deal. And I think that was the beginning of it for me, but I'm definitely, as a journalist and just human being, I'm used to rejection, and sometimes I thrive on it and it just motivates me more. But yeah, it can definitely be challenging at times, even if it wasn't in that case.
Now, I want to follow up with that a little bit, Aaron. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. Mentioning about, getting support from people around you. Now, I understand that you have a friend who happened to be the general manager for the San Jose Giants, minor league
Yeah.
baseball team, and he was able to get you to the ballpark, set up a table for you, a booth, if you will, and let you, promote your book. So that has got to be a great thrill. Is probably not something that a lot of people get a chance to do as an author. But talk about
Mhm.
that a little bit. How did that come about?
What a segue, KP. I like that. Such a pro. That was a good transition though. But so yeah, Ben Taylor's a good friend of mine, and we did radio together at UC Davis, 90.3 FM KDVS. We had a nightly talk show every Tuesday night where we talked sports with us, and there were other panelists on as well. And then I was also doing play-by-play and color commentary alongside him. Most of the sports I did color, he did play-by-play, but we sometimes we flipped it for baseball um, or softball. Softball would just be play-by-play. But anyway, we did all kinds of sports, women's basketball, football as well. But so we've stayed in touch over the years. He's a really good friend, and he runs marketing and event planning and promotions for the San Jose Giants, the San Francisco Giants single A affiliate. And he had this idea. So I've been keeping him in the loop for years as this project has been unfolding. And he's been saying had been saying for a long time, starting a while ago, I'd love to have you come to the stadium, set up a booth. As it got closer, then he asked me if I wanted to throw out the first pitch, and like an idiot, I said no. I'm gonna be too nervous, and I don't want to be the center of attention. Please, I'll just have the booth, but I don't want that. Thank you, though. I appreciate the offer. And then the day of, an hour before he sprung it on me, actually, we are having you throw out the first pitch, and you have no choice. There's no time to back out. And I was grateful. I'm grateful in retrospect for that. It's better that I probably didn't know earlier too, because I think I would have built it up in my head and been more nervous. But I was one of three people throwing out the first pitch, so it wasn't as bad where I was the first. I could watch what the first person did, and they have an events person that tells you this is where you stand. At this point, you walk over here, then you do this. Then after you throw it out, throw the pitch, you take a photo op with a player, and then you walk back to the first base line, and then we'll walk around home plate to back to leave the field. So they really hold your hand, metaphorically speaking, for just what to do and stuff. But still, it was really nerve-wracking. But anyway, I'm going into the minutia just because I was just taken back to that moment, and it was so cool. But way more rewarding and gratifying than throwing out the first pitch was meeting people who are really passionate about baseball and reading. And it was my very first book event, and I want to do a lot more. And it was about 2.5 weeks before the book came out. So it was really my first sense of what strangers, for lack of a better word, how they were receiving the book, even though they hadn't read it yet. When I was giving them my pitch, to see their eyes light up and to say, "Whoa, that's really cool!" And I have a daughter or son or cousin or husband or me who really loves to read, and I'm definitely gonna buy this. Um, or I'm gonna recommend it to someone or whatever it was. I just had really good conversations with good people. And a fun quirk that I'll add before I go on and make this just a monologue is um, there was this person, a UC Davis alum. She was the very first person to buy a copy, which I thought was poetic image. It was cool how it worked out because Ben went to UC Davis, so did I. We're in San Jose, so that's over an hour from Davis, but she walked up right as we were still setting up the table. So it was a really good confidence boost, and just a cool special coincidence that she was a fellow Aggie, and she ended up purchasing a couple of copies. Her name is Jill. And not only did she go to Davis, but her husband did, as did her daughter. And her daughter was on the swim team and had overlapped with Ben and me when we were doing radio. So I'm not sure if we ended up interviewing her. We did have a number of student athletes on the show, but if not her, we definitely had one of her teammates on our radio show, and we covered all sports. So that was just a special coincidence and just an amazing event. I want to do a lot more events like that, but I'm so grateful for Ben for making that happen.
Wow. I've got a question that maybe ties into both, if I could just jump in here, KP. Um, that was a fascinating story about the book promotion. Is there any plan to promote the book in Japan?
That's an interesting question. They're not concrete plans at the moment because the book hasn't been translated into Japanese. And I mean, still something could be done. A lot of people speak English, speak and read English in Tokyo, and there are a lot of gaijin who live there, of course. But at the moment, there isn't. It would just, to be honest, be costly to go there and stay there if we didn't have certain things in place. But I definitely think there's potential to do that. And I've been talking with my friend Jonathan Santiago, who was my travel companion. He also did radio with us at KDVS, and then we had a podcast on the side that we did in college. He was my travel companion the first and only time that I went to Tokyo, which I talk about in the acknowledgments. Um, he and I had a great time, 2.5 weeks in Tokyo in the spring of 2018. And he's been talking about wanting to go back. He has that itch and possibly will be going back in 2025. And if I can make that happen, then I would love to do that both again, um, recreationally, but also just professionally. I think it would be a really good opportunity to spread this story more widely. And as I alluded to, the publisher handles that, but I would just be honored if it ends up getting translated into Japanese because um, it would just be able to reach a wider audience and have people who love NPB and the Swallows and or followed Tony there, but may not read in English, be able to have them devour his story and enjoy it along with all of us.
That would really be great, and I hope it does get translated into Japanese. And I would love to interview you again, were you to go to Japan to promote the book. You bring out the fact that Japanese fans are very passionate about baseball. So I think that part of the book certainly would be of great interest to a Japanese readership. That and the differences between the American baseball culture and the Japanese baseball culture. That was one of the fascinating parts of the book for me as well. The whole issue about what's valued in training camp here is completely
Yeah,
rejected here. What they like over here, they neglect over
yeah.
here. And it just
It's
went back and forth. And I think that was in the earlier chapters that you covered that part. And that was fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's so fascinating too. And one thing I was really cognizant of, and I hope I did a good job of avoiding this trap was as a Westerner, I didn't want to um come off as, I don't know if ethnocentric is the right word, but judgmental of how they do the things over there. I more wanted to describe and contrast because I I'm not making a value judgment about which is better, which culture is better, even though I'm so fascinated by so many of the things I learned about Japanese culture. I'm more just wanted to lay out what I was able to glean from my researching and reporting and paint that picture. But also it's really important for me to talk a lot to Go Fujisawa and and a few others, but Go Fujisawa was the main person who he has a toe in both worlds because he was born and raised in a rural part of Japan. I'm talking about Tony's interpreter. Yet he went to Chicago to work, Indiana State to get his master's and do an internship in sports management, um, and so I really wanted his perspective too. I didn't want it to just be a white guy, Westerner, um, just talking about other white guys and Westerners in Japan, because I just feel like that's uh, just not the best way to handle it, and it comes off as awkward and kind of like you're using another culture, people to promote yourself and you're talking about it as an outsider. So I really wanted to get that inside perspective as well.
Yeah, there were several incidents where I think you did that brilliantly, and it related to tragedy. Um,
Mhm.
the nuclear incident in Japan and the earthquake in Japan, and in both of those instances, um, you described sports as kind of serving a healing function. And I think that's pretty universal. I think that sports is something that people turn
Yeah,
to
so
no matter
cool.
where you are. Yeah, whatever culture you're in, you will turn to your national sport, your local sport, or whatever, and that will help to rebuild. Again, we'll go back to community. And I think with those two incidents, I won't go into detail because I want people to read the book. But again, the nuclear incident and a particular earthquake where you bring that up, but the details, the cultural responses I think would be different. You say things about people literally sacrificing their lives in Japan, in the one particular case, which is something that I think in a Western culture we would probably not do. But it's all tied back to sports, and sports being that sort of one local point that we can all rally around to help us get past the tragedy. So I thought that was really well done. How did you come
Thank
up
you.
with that idea? Was that a function of, well, let me sort of compare, what sports does beyond just providing us with entertainment here in North America and what it does in Japan?
That stemmed from really wanting to talk about the earthquake and tsunami because no disrespect to baseball or sports, as you know how I've talked about it throughout the conversation already. I love sports and what it can do for humanity and people, but I just think in a vacuum, sports are not that important. It's just a game that people are playing and they make a lot of money doing it and entertain people. But these are matters of life and death. People lost their lives. They lost the lives of their loved ones. They lost their homes. It's just such a tragedy. And I was so inspired by the country and its people's resilience in trying to recover. And it took so long. Some people would even argue that 11 years later, that my math was wrong, that 13 and a half years later, they still haven't fully recovered. But it's the act of recovering, of coming together, of staring at tragedy and saying, we're not going to let it define us, and we're not going to let it get us down, and we're not going to stop playing baseball. We'll take a break. We'll honor the people whose lives were lost and what happened, and we're not going to rush back to the field, which some owners were trying to do, but we're going to honor that and mourn for that, but we're also going to get back to everyday life, and sports is going to be a vehicle to do that. And that was always the plan for me, to include that. And I wanted to do one kind of micro chapter, if you will, where I'm going through anecdotes of the ensemble cast, and it's more of on a micro level. And then the next chapter was more of a macro level, where we're talking about the negotiations between the league and the players union on when they return to play, or protests of nuclear energy in a major square in Tokyo, things like that. Pensioners volunteering to test radiation levels in dangerous areas, just things like that. That players donating millions of yen, and all this kind of stuff. I just thought it was too important and consequential to not include. I just felt like the story just wouldn't have been as substantive if it was just more of a purely baseball story with a little culture sprinkled in.
Right. Yeah, I think your judgment was, I mean, right on. As I said, those are some
Thank
of the
you.
best elements in the book. Fantastic.
Thanks
Thanks,
a
Aaron.
lot.
Well, Aaron, just to go back a little bit, thanks, Dan, as well for the great questions. But just going back a little bit, of course, Aaron, you're talking about, meeting with very excited, fans who talk to you about the book. Again, the book is A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. So the fans at the ballpark in San Jose were talking to you about this book, and they're very excited. And of course, for you as well, being the writer and being the promoter of the book, you have to obviously have some kind of I guess a personality, if you will, to be able to engage with them. So is it natural for you, Aaron, to kind of be, I guess, strong with communication and, connecting with people? What are your thoughts on that? And of course, I think it's important for a writer, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well.
One, I like these questions, even though you are making me self-conscious talking about myself so much. But so it's a really interesting balance, and I don't want to be too negative or self-deprecating. I I think I'm a great communicator, but I'm definitely an introvert. I'm not the best in group settings. At a certain age, I was a confident kid. I was always raising my hand, answering questions. I wanted to go to the front and talk about stuff. At a certain point, and this is probably true for a lot of kids, you start to get that social anxiety. You start second guessing, do I want to be the smartest kid in the class? Do I want to stand out, or do I want to fit in more with everyone else and not be the know-it-all and whatever? But also just I started to kind of fear public speaking, getting nervous. I would say maybe that was, I don't know, maybe starting around college or something like that, um, where you have all these other things that are on your mind um, socially, and you start to maybe lose confidence in yourself or focus on superficial things like how your voice sounds or how you look, things like that. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going too specific with this, but so I can talk for hours if I'm passionate about something, and I love having in-depth, substantive, one-on-one conversations with people, or doing amazing interviews with guys like you on topics that I love and that I'm well versed in. But it is not my natural strength or my preference to be giving a talk in front of people I don't really know, or being the liveliest, most energetic guy in the room. That's not really me. I'm more of a writer who I think has some interesting things to say, but I'm not the most comfortable being the center of attention. So that's been an adjustment for me, but I progressively got more comfortable. For instance, at that book event, it was pretty cool, and um, I had a relative too, Leslie. She was there helping me figure out a lot of the logistics. So that also really allowed me to be more present in the moment, talking with these prospective readers about the story and my journey in the process, and really focusing on that while she handled some of the other things that are less sexy, I guess you could say, but important, like making sure people pay, writing, giving them a receipt, making sure that after I took the book jacket off to sign the book, that I put the book jacket back on. Um, just little things, because when I'm really focused on interpersonal communication, sometimes I get a little absent-minded, um, and can be forgetful about certain things. Um, and so anyway, so I have some social anxiety, but I love talking about the book and stories that I find fulfilling. So that's been a special thing, and I'd love to do more events.
That's great because I would guess that potential buyers and readers can see that excitement level, the passion when when you go and talk about it. So that maybe will be kind of like uh, a push to them to go ahead and get that book and recommend that book, as again it speaks of the passion that the writer in this case that you have when discussing it. So that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Uh,
I hope so. One funny thing I want to note that so the on the cover is Tony Barnette, of course. I can hold it up. Um, and I had some facial hair. I don't think I look like him that much, but dark hair, facial hair. There were more than just one person. Maybe like 3 or 4 people at least thought I was the player when they came up. They were asking me about playing baseball, and while I'm flattered, I don't think I look like a pro athlete. And I just thought it was funny, and it sometimes it was kind of a cool icebreaker, a little bit, where I laughed and told them, no, no, I'm not him. And but I'll take the compliment. But that was kind of then I'd be able to get into a more natural discussion once the ice was broken that way. But I just thought it was a little peculiar that multiple people had that same confusion. But anyway,
Guess that means you must look like Tony Barnette.
I don't think I do though. Do I? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I think looking at the picture now, maybe a little.
In other pictures, I don't know if you saw us in person. I don't think you would think that. But also, Tony is clean shaven now, so he looks a lot different. But yeah. Anyway, funny thing that happened.
Now,
Definitely a great icebreaker. But yeah, Stan, go ahead.
no, I just had a question. Was there anything? As I say, this book I think is fantastic. There's nothing to add or subtract. Did you have any content that you decided, well, this doesn't belong in the book, or I'm writing a chapter and I don't think it'll fit in, or I don't think it'll quite work? Do you have any material that you could use, or that's there and available for maybe a next project?
Um, well, as I mentioned before, there were definitely things that I cut, like the Yuhei Sakai, who goes by just by Yuhei, kind of like Madonna. But that was cut. And there are a number of other examples that just are not coming to mind right now. But um, I would say there aren't any um big topics that I felt like they were cut and the story is hurting because of it, or necessarily a lot more that I could I'm not sure how to answer this. I could have enough material for another one, but I think it's less likely. It's not as likely that this would turn into a second book on this particular topic, because I feel like it was covered in such depth, and there are other things that I would want to write that are not necessarily related, but definitely a lot was cut. A lot of quotes from different people who are adding support for certain things. Um, and yeah, as I alluded to before, I don't know if long-winded or verbose is the right terminology for writing, but I'm the opposite of a person who is BSing for an essay. They have X amount of words and they have to get to the word count and they're stretching. I've always been, damn, this word count is too low. I just really want to write way more and I feel restricted by the word count. But as a writer and journalist, that's a really good muscle to use, and good challenge to be more concise and impactful with your words, because I from this experience in shortening the book and word count significantly, even though I fought it at first, it was like, it's a cliche, but people say it's my baby and how can I get rid of anything? I've been working on it for years. I found that it strengthened the storytelling when I was able to be more concise and judicious with particular wording, and not have a similar quote from 3 or 4 different people. Just pick the best one or two that really paint the picture, and then also paraphrasing when you can. If a quote is not necessarily that evocative or something, just paraphrase it. and you don't have to introduce the quote and then quote it if it's not that good of a quote. So just things like that. Um, but yeah, I could write more about the story, and I may do articles to help promote the book on things that aren't necessarily excerpts from it, where there's new information or related information, stuff that's in the book that I build upon. But I don't anticipate it being another project on this scale for this particular topic.
Right. No, as I say, I think the book is just perfect in length. I don't think that there's any word wasted. I just love the presentation. I was just thinking of some of the, I won't describe in detail the incident, but when Tony's daughter, I think she was 15 months old, and it was the Hillary and the daughter went to down to the field after a game.
All-star
And
game, yeah.
yeah, after the daughter was playing with a mascot and was very excited, and then I think one of the other players joined, and then something happened, which I won't describe. When you get to that level of sort of personal anecdote, I won't mention what happened, but I laughed for quite a while after reading that passage. Um, but did Tony react to any of that kind of, well, now you're getting to some really very specific anecdotes?
Did when I was asking him about it,
Yeah,
or
or now
well,
now that he's read the book, how
well,
did
well,
yeah.
he and his wife told me about it. So that's how I learned about
Oh
the
yeah.
story. So he definitely wasn't surprised that I knew about it, but yeah, he got a kick out of me including that. But as a writer, how could I not include that? Just such vivid imagery, and I appreciate you not wanting to spoil it. I never know. There's a fine line in interviews between teasing something and but if you don't, I don't know, maybe should we say what happened or
No, I
uh
think it's one of those.
okay, we'll
Yeah,
leave them wanting more so they have to purchase the book.
yes, yes.
Um but that it was a good player too. Second baseman for the team, Tetsudo Yamada. It's the player that you're referencing. So I also thought that was cool that um well, it was at the All-Star game, so that makes sense that he was a good player. But so one of his Swallows teammates, and Tony made two All-Star games in Japan. Unfortunately, didn't make more because he was injured often, um, just at the worst times. But um, so that was, I can't remember if it was 2015. I think, yeah, it would have been 2015. Um, and that was his final season in Japan. So really cool story that I'm grateful that I was able to learn and relay that to the audience. But I definitely wanted to get a lot of his family life in there because he wasn't there alone for the bulk of it. When he was, as you guys know, there alone, that was very difficult for him at the very beginning. And so when his girlfriend at the time, Hillary, rushed over to be with him, missing her college graduation, that just meant the world to him. They were on Skype when he was feeling alone, but navigating the 16-hour time difference and just we're doing it now on Zoom. It's just I don't know if you guys would agree, but um with loved ones and people you're close with, it's just not the same as in person. And I think we all experienced that during the pandemic. And so once she was there, he just he was so heartened by that and felt a lot less isolated and alienated because it can feel awfully lonely when you're halfway across the world and you're struggling on the field. As Tony says, everything just felt so bad on and off the field at that moment. So Hillary was a godsend for him at that moment.
Yeah, yeah. I do not want to spoil that incident. I guarantee that readers will know exactly what I'm talking about and what you're talking about when they get to that point.
Yeah.
I had to put it down, and I was laughing for a few minutes. Picked it up
I'm
again, reread
glad.
it, started laughing again, and put it down. So once you get past it, you'll know about it. But yeah, no, that again, it's a really fascinating book. Um, and the idea of being alone in a culture that you don't understand. I think that anyone who's been in that or experienced anything like that, you don't have to be a baseball player. You don't have to be an athlete of any kind. I think that actually is an element to the story that will make the book widely accessible. Um,
Thank you.
Again, that's a
I agree.
completely different angle that I've not encountered. At least I've been racking my brain trying to think of somebody who's done anything similar, and cannot come up with another title.
That was my hope and challenge um, in writing a book in a way that would connect to non-sports fans or non-baseball fans. And I don't know if I completely did that, but I tried to, because there were things, as for lack of a better term, as a baseball nerd, that were important for me to include, like dramatic play-by-play of consequential games, and just kind of the nitty-gritty of rules in Japan and how it's set up, and how there are two stages in the climax series, and how all the better seeded team has home field advantage every single game in the first stage, and how in the second stage, if you have a better record, you start with a 1 game advantage. Just things like that that are a little bit more nerdy about rules and the play-by-play sequence of things happening, that I think a non-baseball fan may tune out, or be like, that's not really that interesting to me. But I hope overall there was enough in there culturally, and like you said, as a foreigner in a strange land, that people can relate to, or if you're somewhere and you don't speak the language that most people speak, just that feeling, um, and just the inspiring aspect of it, even if you aren't a baseball fan, that he had a dream, and it took him longer, much longer than he expected to achieve it. But and it was not easy. Again and again, he had so many setbacks, including major injuries, getting released by the Swallows, demoted multiple times by the top team, and he kept fighting. And as cliched and corny as it may sound, um, I just love those narratives, and it inspires me so much. Even as someone who worked so closely with it, I can't not feel inspired by it.
Yeah, yeah. That again, I think, yeah, brilliantly done. And you're right. It is a very inspirational story, and whether or not you play baseball doesn't matter. That part I think is universal. Having a dream, working for the dream, missing the target, suffering the consequences, getting back up, doing it again, and a great part of the story. But yeah,
Thank
and if
you.
you're a baseball nerd too, yeah, I mean the whole I think it was in I can't remember chapter 12 or chapter 13 where you describe Tony changing up what his goal as a pitcher is from trying to lead strikeouts to. And
Mhm.
I thought, well, as a I mean, I wouldn't call myself a nerd necessarily, but as I was reading that, I thought, yeah, that was fascinating. And I again
Yeah,
something
it's
that
so
was
interesting to
not
me.
done before. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say, before I forget, should have probably talked about this earlier when we were talking about the promo aspect of it. I'm excited to share that Tony and I are doing a giveaway contest. So we launched it a week. I don't know when this will come out, but we launched it on July 24th, and so it runs through August 17th. So I think that's something like 3.5 weeks. And for any interested reader who purchases a hardcover copy during that period, um, you're entered in to win a second signed hardcover copy, as well as signed baseball cards by Tony himself. And we're doing 34 of 43 copies sold win something. So there's a like an 80% chance, if you enter the contest, of winning either a signed book or signed baseball cards. And we're also gonna give these bookmarks, signed bookmarks, to people who win. And if someone wants to purchase more than one copy, then they're entered more than once. So um, I think it would be pretty difficult for someone who bought 2 copies not to win, um, with those odds. But Anyway, we'd love it if anyone is interested based on the conversation that we're having right now, and would like to get a copy of the book for themselves or family or friends. Now's the perfect time because of this giveaway contest. So just wanted to put that out there.
Is that contest on your website, or?
So good question. So I posted about it on my Instagram page, which is at by Aaron Fish. So by Aaron Fisch, just the first syllable of my last name. And I've also shared about it on Twitter, on X, and Facebook. But essentially, all that one has to do to enter is purchase a hardcover copy and write 1 to 3 sentences on the social media platform of their choice on why they're excited to read the book, and just send me proof of purchase. And that could be my email address, which is on my Instagram page, aaronfishman519@gmail.com, or DM me on Facebook or X. I mean, on Instagram or X. Just reach out to me. I'm not that hard to find. Just tell me you purchased the book. Um, you posted about why you're excited to read it, and that's it. And then you're entered into the contest, and we're happy and excited to do this and help spread the word to more people, like-minded people, about this story.
Once again, the book is titled A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. And I want to ask you, Aaron, who came up with the title? And I know that Stan mentioned the word Gaijin earlier. Could you tell our listeners who don't know what a Gaijin is?
Yeah, so it was a collaborative effort, but I'm not going to take credit for it. The publisher came up with Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back, which I love. I think the subtitle it's just so obvious what it is from that, but also inspiring. It's an action verb, chasing a dream to Japan and back, and you really get a quick snapshot and a good sense of the journey just in the title alone. Um, I always knew Gaijin or Gaijin would have been part of the title. They came up with a particular language of Baseball Gaijin, but um, so it's slang for foreigner, and it's long been a little bit of a derisive or derogatory term, but it's one of those things that has been taken in by the Gaijin themselves, and they kind of just owned it, and they use it themselves, and it's not used as an insult when they use it. So it's not an offensive thing to them, even though it can be used derisively. And I thought that was important to address because I there was some conversation about it, or I saw a comment on Reddit wondering about this, and the person, prospective reader, assumed that it was just the term being thrown around by a Westerner who didn't understand what it was, or didn't fully appreciate that it was a negative term. But we're aware of the connotation and the history. It's just in recent years and decades, it's been spun by the foreigners themselves as kind of like a point of pride. Like, yeah, we are foreigners. We don't completely fit in, but we have this sense of community, and we're doing our best to accommodate to your culture, which we love. But at the same time, we're not exactly of this group. We stand out. We're not native Japanese. And so it's kind of that melding of accommodating, but also you still keep some of your ways naturally, and some of your culture when you're in a foreign land, um and you gravitate naturally to people you have more in common with. And so that's partially why a lot of these gaijin featured in the book became so close, living together in Japan together.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Before we finish, any more thoughts or any more things to discuss, Stan or Aaron? This has been fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Aaron. This has really been fantastic. I appreciate the book, and I know I'll be recommending it. Baseball Gaijin. Thank you so much,
Thank,
Aaron.
thank you so much. It was my pleasure. I love doing these interviews, and you guys had such interesting things to say, um yeah, I really appreciate it so much that a lot of this resonated with you, and that you'll be recommending it to others. And um yeah, if you ever want to talk again, or if there's some way we can collaborate in the future, I'd absolutely love it, because as I said, no exaggeration, this was such a pleasure to do with you guys.
Absolutely. Likewise. And I look forward to the future. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
Fantastic. So that's my co-host Stan Markotich and our guest Aaron Fischman. The book is called A Baseball Gaijin, Chasing a Dream to Japan and Back. And you can find this book everywhere where books are sold. So thank you, gentlemen, and we will talk again soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.